In the late 19th century, a world teetering on the edge of modernity, society held a rigid view of success. It was a time of industrial boom and artistic revolution, but also one of strict social codes and a burgeoning, often brutal, understanding of mental health. For an artiste, recognition wasn't just about talent. It was about navigating a labyrinth of salons, critics, and wealthy patrons who dictated what was considered great art. In this world, a man named Vincent van Gogh dared to paint not just what he saw, but what he felt. And for that, he would pay a profound price. Most of us know the story, or at least we think we do. The starry night, the sunflowers, the severe deer, the tragic genius who sold only one painting in his lifetime. But the true story of Vincent van Gogh is far more complex and heartbreaking. It's a story not just of art, but of a silent battle fought in a world that wasn't ready to listen. His greatest challenge wasn't paint or canvas. It was a profound sense of isolation, amplified by an art world that turned its back on him. Imagine pouring your entire soul onto a canvas, creating something vibrant and alive, only to be met with cold indifference and rejection. Imagine your own brother, your only financial and emotional support, telling you that your revolutionary work simply isn't selling. This was Vincent's reality. The pressure was immense, not just the internal pressure to create, but the external pressure to survive, to justify his existence, to prove he wasn't a failure. His journey began not with a brush, but with a Bible. Born into a family of clergymen and art dealers, Vincent initially sought to be a pastor, to minister to the poor coal miners in the Borinage region of Belgium. He gave away his food, his clothes, his bed, living in squalor to better understand their suffering. His religious superiors saw this not as piety, but as an excess of zeal that was unbecoming of a clergyman. They dismissed him. It was a devastating blow. Another institution rejecting his passionate, all-or-nothing approach to life. It was in this moment of profound failure, stripped of his first calling, that he turned to his second, art. He wrote to his brother, Theo, "I want to try to get back on my feet by taking up my pencil, which I had forsaken in my discouragement, and starting to draw again." He was 27 years old, with no formal training, embarking on a path that would consume him entirely. He moved to Paris, the epicenter of the art world, where he was exposed to the vibrant colors and bold techniques of the Impressionists. His own palette, once dominated by the dark, earthy tones of his early work, like the Potato Eaters, exploded with light. He painted with a new urgency, a feverish energy, applying thick strokes of paint directly onto the canvas. He was creating a new language, one that pulsed with emotion. But Paris, with its competitive spirit and relentless pace, also took its toll. The constant pressure and his heavy drinking began to wear on his fragile mental state. Seeking refuge and a new kind of light, he moved to the south of France, to the sun-drenched town of Arles. It was here, in Arles, that Van Gogh's genius reached its zenith. He painted with a furious passion, sometimes completing a canvas in a single day. The sun-scorched landscapes, the blossoming orchards, the humble faces of the local postman and his family, everything became a subject for his electrifying vision. He dreamed of creating a studio of the South, an artist's colony where like-minded painters could live and work together. He invited the artist Paul Gauguin to join him, an encounter that would prove to be catastrophic. Their personalities clashed violently. Gauguin was arrogant and dominant. Vincent was volatile and intensely sensitive. Arguments escalated until one fateful night in December 1888. Following a heated confrontation, a distraught Van Gogh took a razor and severed a part of his own left ear. This single, infamous act has come to define Van Gogh in the popular imagination as the mad artist. But it was a desperate cry for help from a man in unbearable psychic pain. He was institutionalized, first in Arles, and later in the asylum at Saint-Remy. It's a miracle that during this period of immense turmoil, he produced some of his most iconic and beloved works. Trapped within the asylum walls, he painted the world he could see from his barred window. He painted the swirling, celestial chaos of the starry night, a canvas that seems to vibrate with cosmic energy and profound loneliness. He painted the irises and the cypress trees in the asylum garden, finding beauty and life even in confinement. Each brushstroke was a battle against the darkness, an assertion of his will to create, to connect, to feel. The paint was his therapy, his language, his reason for being. But the silence from the art world was deafening. While he was creating these masterpieces, the world outside saw him as a failure, a madman whose work was worthless. The weight of it all was crushing. After leaving the asylum, he moved to Auvers-sur-Oise, a small village near Paris, under the care of Dr. Paul Gachet, a physician and art lover. For a brief period, there was a glimmer of hope. He painted at a manic pace, producing nearly 80 paintings in just over 2 months. His colors were rich, his compositions dynamic, but the underlying despair never truly left him. The feeling of being a burden on his brother Theo, the constant financial precarity, and the lack of recognition for his life's work formed a storm he could no longer weather. On July 27, 1890, Vincent van Gogh walked into a wheat field one he had recently painted and shot himself in the chest. He stumbled back to his room and died 2 days later in the arms of his beloved brother Theo. His last words were reportedly, "The sadness will last forever." Vincent van Gogh's path to fame was entirely posthumous. It was his sister-in-law, Theo's widow, Johanna van Gogh, who became the unlikely champion of his legacy. After both brothers died within months of each other, she was left with hundreds of paintings and drawings deemed worthless. But she saw their power. She meticulously organized his work, corresponded with critics and dealers, and arranged exhibitions. Slowly, painstakingly, the world began to see what she and Theo had seen all along. By the early 20th century, Van Gogh was being hailed as a pioneer of modern art, a genius whose emotional honesty had changed the course of painting forever. Today, his canvases command hundreds of millions of dollars. They hang in the world's most prestigious museums, drawing millions of visitors who stand in awe of their beauty and power. But this triumph is bittersweet. It's a story that forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. We celebrate the masterpiece, but do we understand the struggle that created it? We marvel at the million-dollar art world, but do we acknowledge the human cost for artists who are pushed to their limits? Van Gogh's story is a powerful reminder that behind every piece of art is a human being with fears, hopes, and vulnerabilities. The pressure to produce, the sting of rejection, and the struggle for financial stability are realities that artists still face today. The silence and stigma surrounding mental health can be just as isolating now as it was in the 19th century. We need to create a culture where it's safe for artists to be vulnerable, to seek help without fear of judgment or professional ruin. We must share the reality of what it takes to create. By understanding Vincent's struggle, we can better support the artists living and working among us today. Let's not wait 100 years to recognize their genius and their humanity. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, please give this video a like. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and share it with someone you think needs to hear it. Your support helps us continue to shed light on these important conversations. See you in the next one.